Hello. So today is the 29th of October 2021. It's an absolutely fantastic day for the C.F.S patient community because the NICE guidelines were published after midnight this morning. What does this mean? It means that patients, in theory, will no longer be subjected to graded exercise therapy or cognitive behavioural therapy in terms of them being treatments or cures, which they've never been. Anyone that's done our training, and I would encourage anybody that hasn't done our training yet to do it, especially now that these NICE guidelines have been published. You need to know what you're dealing with. I think up until this point everybody assumed it was psychosomatic, that it was anxiety, that it was psychological. However, NICE have now come out and said exercise is known to harm patients. It's a biological, neurological disease. Massive improvements on the 2007 guideline, but there's still a lot of wiggle room, and there are a number of loopholes that I wouldn't be surprised if they are manipulated by proponents of graded exercise therapy and CBT. However, let's be optimistic. Unfortunately, NICE, their remit has kind of been reached. It's up to the C.F.S patient community, charities, advocacy groups to educate and professional organisations such as the Royal College of General Practitioners, Royal College of Occupational Therapists. I've got no idea how long it's going to take them to educate their professional staff. So in the meantime, I would suggest you take part in our training. It is CPD accredited and it's blooming good. It's won awards. We've received fantastic feedback. You will learn everything you need to know about C.F.S. And you'll get a very good grounding in the disease. There is no excuse to not know what myalgic encephalomyelitis is. One thing I absolutely love is that NICE have stopped referring to it as C.F.S.ME. Might seem trivial, but by putting C.F.S first, C.F.S was created by psychologists. It infers that ME is a psychological condition when it's not. ME is given priority now, ME-CFS, and anyone that continues to use C.F.S.ME clearly does not understand what myalgic encephalomyelitis is. It's a big trigger. It's like a red flag. Any patient or advocate or charity that sees C.F.S.ME, you know that person has not had training on the disease. So I'm going to read an extract from the guidelines. I'm going to read it from Twitter. I'm going to read it word for word. It says, graded exercise therapy is a term used in varying ways by different services supporting people with ME/CFS. In this guideline, graded exercise therapy is defined as first establishing an individual's baseline of achievable exercise or physical activity, then making fixed incremental increases in the time spent being physically active. This definition of graded exercise therapy reflects the descriptions given in the evidence that was reviewed, and it is this approach that the guideline says it should not be undertaken. An individualised approach that should be taken for people with ME/CFS who choose to undertake a physical activity or exercise program is described in recommendations below. So it's basically saying graded exercise therapy in terms of fixed increments of increased activity should stop. They also go on to say that patients should not be referred to gyms for exercise programs that would be given to a healthy person. And basically exercise should not be seen as a treatment or a cure. However, if a patient says, I want to exercise, I am ready to exercise, then under ME/CFS specialist care, that's a trained physio occupational therapist who has actually had training on ME/CFS and or post-exertional malaise, will help them to increase their activity. But what worries me is, this is one of the loopholes, what worries me is that when patients first get sick, when GPs have inferred that it's deconditioning, or they've downplayed, or maybe the GP doesn't know about post-exertional malaise, because in my experience the vast majority don't, and that's why they don't understand what ME is, because they don't understand the core nature of it. but there is a way to screen for post-exertional malaise. If a patient doesn't know what post-exertional malaise is and doesn't know that exercise is contraindicated, they may say, oh, can I exercise? Now, would that lead to a C.F.S. or ME clinic encouraging that patient to increase their activity? That's what worries me, because in my early days I didn't stop exercising. I was encouraged to exercise, just very simply by my GP, take your dog for more walks. No mention of graded exercise therapy. But I was also never screened for post-exertional malaise, and I was also given a C.F.S. diagnosis. I was never checked for post-exertional malaise. I should have been given an ME diagnosis, which is why I self-identify as an ME patient, because I suffer from the core characteristic of ME. So I self-identify as an ME patient, because going by the diagnostic criteria that my GP should have used, I have ME. So there are a number of loopholes. However, it is progress, and it is very good to see. Unfortunately, we are already seeing C.F.S. clinics changing their language. To be clear, if NICE had thought we just need to rebrand the language, they would not have invested so much time and energy in spending 3 years plus, it was around 4 actually, 4 years reviewing the scientific evidence. If all it was going to take was to give graded exercise therapy a different name. So if what you're doing is encouraging patients to increase their activity slowly over time, that is graded exercise therapy rebranded. You should not be doing that. I would encourage anyone that is thinking of doing that, after these NICE guidelines have been published, to do our training. It will be the best £59 you ever spend, because patients now have recourse. And although we've never been able to take legal action before, because graded exercise therapy was included in the 2007 NICE guidelines, it's not recommended now. So if a patient is encouraged to increase their activity, and that patient deteriorates to the point of being house or bed bound, there is nothing stopping them from taking legal action. And you are risking your licence. So I'll just leave that there, so that it's in your interest now to do training on ME/CFS. I will also say the latest evidence shows the vast majority of long COVID patients also have post-exertional malaise. I'm not saying that every patient or every one of those patients has ME. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there is now another illness that has the key defining characteristic of ME. Those patients that have post-exertional malaise need to be managed in exactly the same way as ME. And anecdotally, I've heard that there are councils and NHS trusts around the UK who are encouraging patients to exercise. They are outsourcing exercise-based rehab programs to gyms and leisure centres. Does that fit with what I've just said about the NICE guidelines for ME because of post-exertional malaise? Again, that's legal action waiting to happen, because there is so much evidence out there now that patients with this mitochondria issue, which long COVID patients have and ME patients have, should not be encouraged to increase their activity. Anyone that's really new to ME, just doing this Facebook Live now is going to cause a crash for me. Thinking, talking, sitting upright, communicating, all requires energy. This will cause a crash in me. I'm doing it because it's important, but I will be managing my energy all day around the energy that I've used during this, could be 10-minute Facebook Live video. So on what planet does it make sense to try to treat or cure a disease where the slightest increase of activity causes a deterioration of symptoms? We're not talking about me being incredibly sleepy or tired. It means that every single one of my symptoms will flare. Every single one. And I have around 25, 30 symptoms. So it's not just exercise, it's activity. Sometimes simply going to the physio appointment on a bus or driving, or even being a passenger in a car, is exerting too much energy. And then on top of that, you're expected to increase your activity while you're in with the physio? It makes no sense. And what I would say about physios is Post-exertional malaise is you feel the impact immediately after, but you also feel it 24 to 72 hours later. Physios do not see you 24 to 72 hours later. You do not see post-exertional malaise. So if you want to see the true eye-opening reality of ME, I would encourage physios to do a follow-up appointment at the patient's home 2 to 3 days later. Then you will see the impact of increased activity. One thing I'm working on both with my Stripy Light Ball head-on and as an ME patient is to have a new mechanism for patients to report harms. Because I know that although the NICE guidelines were published this morning, we are not going to experience change overnight. There are too many people saying they are refusing to budge and that they will not implement the new guidelines. So harm is going to continue. And in recent months, proponents of GET have said, oh, it's news to us. Graded exercise therapy doesn't cause harm because there are no reported harms. The reason for that is there is nowhere for patients to report harms. MHRA's yellow card system only does drugs and devices. I personally believe anything recommended by the NHS as a treatment or a cure should be regulated. However, with graded exercise therapy and CBT, there's no regulation. So I've contacted everybody I can think of, every department I can think of, to create a new mechanism to report harms. Because you can't keep saying, oh, there's no harms, they don't know what they're talking about, they just want to avoid exercise, they're lazy, they're malingerers. That's the usual narrative. Instead, give us somewhere, prove that you're right, give us somewhere to report harms. If we're not harmed, we won't be reporting anything. So that's a work in progress. I'm not expecting change overnight, but the more people that do our training, the more eyes will be opened, the more educated judgment calls will be made. Healthcare professionals need to know what ME is. Before COVID-19, 1 in 500 people had ME/C.F.S. COVID-19 is now known to have triggered cases of ME/C.F.S. We had well over 250,000 patients in the UK, up to 30 million patients worldwide. Who knows what that number's up to now? And yet very few actually know what ME/C.F.S is. So if your healthcare organisation that you work for does not offer you training, if you've never had training within medical school, please do our training. It's not full of medical jargon or case studies. You learn the history, the stigma, the PACE trial, the economic burden, how we're affected, how we're diagnosed, and how you can support patients. Everything you need to know to give you a very good grounding on the disease is included in our training. 3 hours of learning, 3 CPD points for £59. And the reason we charge for it is because 50% of our surplus goes to ME research. There are benefits here for the ME/C.F.S patient community. We need you to do our training, to bring about more adequate support and to fund our research. So it's a very good day today. Please do take a look at the NICE guidelines. We need as many people to know that they're now published as possible. The sooner people are aware, the sooner change can be brought about. Anyway, thank you very much for listening and happy Friday, everybody.